Welcome to the Noble Ape podcast, Ape Reality. I'm Tom Barbalet, and this serves as the January 2008 Mailout. Well, lots of bits and pieces have been going on. As I suspect most of the folk who listen to this podcast also listen to the Biota podcast, you're all well aware of Biota Live, and it's been an interesting project so far. Last week, which I think would be Biota Live number 3, for those of you listening to this out of sync, I did probably about 40 to 45 minutes worth of straight dialogue before we got the first caller, Jeffrey Ventrella. And it was an interesting process. I hadn't really expected so early in the podcast series to be doing a straight rap. However, I guess I'm going to be doing straight raps into the future if callers don't call in. It begs the question whether or not the Saturday morning time, the European matinee as I'm calling it, will net more listeners and more folks calling in. And if that is the case, it may justify the elimination of the Friday night time slot and a movement to Saturday morning full time as a means of capturing these listeners who are, for whatever reason, unable to listen in on the Friday evening time slot. Obviously, the first recording of any new time frame is going to have a particular group of listeners that listen for the first, and whether or not they continue to listen and contribute is another thing. There are still a wide variety of topics to cover in the Biota Live series, and I'm willing to keep on doing it while there are still topics to cover. In terms of levels and things like that, obviously in the previous two, Biota Live 1 and 2 specifically, I re-levelated the podcasts and put them out again, and I think if we have levels issues in the future, I'll probably do levelated versions in a similar time frame with the view to just get out the audio initially. And that's Biota Live so far. Could go on for weeks, months, possibly even years, and I really like the format. My only concern really in the long-term success of it is that it is attached to Blog Talk Radio, and we'll see how Blog Talk Radio goes. Obviously, it's a relatively new enterprise. The technology is still a little bit buggy. It still crashes while I'm recording live shows, and funnily enough, also the call-in feature, which they've been promising, I think, for a number of months now, which will enable listeners to call in directly through their computers, still not operational, probably won't be operational for a good number of months to come. Obviously, that would revolutionise the format, because people all over the world would be able to interact directly rather than having to call a US-based number. So, Biota Live. It's taken a good quantity of my time, good quantity of my energy, but it's still more energy efficient than actually producing multi-participant recorded podcasts. So in that regard, it's a box ticked. And I think, to a certain extent, it has reinvigorated the kind of broader hobbyist artificial life community. So my interest is to get academics in the medium term, and also to do mainstream science publication publicity, which I think is something that I'll be talking with Bruce Damer about when one can get his feet on the ground. He's very busy currently, although this seems to have been the narrative with regards to Bruce ever since I picked up the duties at Biota. In fact, I picked up the duties of Biota primarily because Bruce was so busy. In addition to this, and more Bruce Damer-related news, the Dick Gordon book has come up again in terms of taking certain components of my time and energy in terms of editing and producing text and this kind of stuff, so I'm not really sure how this will affect my Noble Ape time frame. Aside from, I released a version of the Noble Ape simulation, I think on Friday, maybe Thursday night? Must have been Thursday night, because I record Biota Live on Friday. And that seems to be relatively well received. That is 687 in Noble Ape simulation speak. And I released it early primarily because I want to produce an XML version of the simulation, or an XML in, XML out version of the simulation in a relatively short time frame, although unfortunately the Dick Gordon work may push the time frame back. I was originally hoping to concentrate on this work today, however the Dick Gordon book time frame seems to have taken precedent now, so it will be a couple of weeks for the XML, per my Biota Live rap about time frames associated with these kind of projects. That's been the month with regards to Noble Ape development, large portion of Biota related stuff, and some actual primary Noble Ape related work. In producing 687, I actually went back and did some debugging and fixed some code, and all these kind of things always occur when you do a release. You start focusing on things that aren't working as they should be, and I think with the XML release in particular, also this will be the case, that more code will be explored and worked on. I still haven't heard anything back from Apple or Intel. I'm not really clear what's going on in terms of the potential of Noble Ape on the iPhone, but obviously my priorities are characterised by the immediacy of folks that get in contact with me, and the immediacy of the work that is needed, and that is what is given the priority in the short term at least. So thank you very much for tuning into this mail out. Any questions, any ideas, any feedback, tom@nobleape.com. I like in particular receiving feedback with regards to Biota Live, the direction of Biota Live, and you have the benefit of having your name read out in a live podcast as well. So 8 p.m. Pacific on a Friday night, or alternatively alternatively this Saturday at 10 a.m. Pacific, which corresponds to 1 p.m. Eastern and 6 p.m. UK time, 7 p.m. for Western Europe, I guess. Thank you very much for tuning into this podcast. Look forward to you tuning into the next podcast.